What's going on, guys? My name is Komar, and today I'm going to show you guys how I made and installed this beautiful wood ShipLap siding for my shed. We'll talk about the wood species, how to finish it, how to cut it, and obviously some installation techniques because there's a bunch of ways that you can do this, and I have some tips and tricks that will help make this process go much smoother for you guys. Let's get started. Welcome to the Komar project. All right, guys, so the very first thing that we actually have to do on this project is to select the wood that we're going to be working with. And when you think of exterior project, your mind instantly goes to teak or cedar. But in my case, I have a ton of ash on the property that I've used on multiple projects, and I'm not worried about it rotting over time because we're going to be using an amazing spar urethane that I'll talk about a little bit later. But first, let's get it into the shop and get it milled up. And then I'm gonna show you guys how to create the rabbets that will allow our ShipLap to overlap each other, making it waterproof and giving us those perfect reveals that we're looking for.
I picked up this ash in a bulk buy on Craigslist last year for a fence project. And since there's so much of it left over, I figured it would look perfect on the shed I'm building as an accent wall because of its natural beauty and richness. Now, ash, when not treated with a finish, is susceptible to bugs, and since it was sitting outside, I have a few wormholes that I need to work around. So to start the milling process, I use my track saw to cut them off and give me a straight edge to work with. Then I can take them over to my table saw and rip them to 6 inches wide, which is going to determine how wide my planks are. And that 6 inches that I went with is just what I thought would look good. But you can rip them to any width you want. It's all about your preference in the final design. Then on the joiner, I made sure that they were flat on one side, and before I could run them through the planer to get the other side parallel, I measured their thickness and organized them from thickest to thinnest. These boards were all over the place with the thickness, and this just made planing them a little bit easier. All I had to do was go down with the planer blade as I went through all of them, instead of going up and down, depending on the board thickness to achieve that 3/4 inches that I was looking for.
All right, guys, so we finally have all the boards milled up. They're flat, they're square, we're good to go. Next thing is we need to create rabbets in all of these so that they interlock with each other or overlap one another. That way the water can flow freely down the shed and I don't have to worry about it getting inside. And there's actually a bunch of ways that you can cut out a rabbet in a piece of wood. And I'm gonna show you guys a couple of them. First one, starting with the router.
I think the router table is a great way of doing it, especially if you're doing short boards like me, and I'm using a 7/8 flush trim bit for this. In total, I need to cut half the thickness of my board so they are flush when they overlap each other. In my case, 3/8 of an inch. But for safety reasons, I don't want to run it all in one pass, so I bring my bit down to less than 1/4 of an inch and make passes on both sides of the planks, making sure that I flip the board in between passes. Then I can raise my bit to 3/8 of an inch and make the final pass on both sides. Now let's say you don't have a router table, but you do have a router. We can do the same exact thing and get great results with a palm router and a rabbiting bit. It's the same process, just upside down and a little bit more tedious. Let's say you don't have a router at all. That's okay, we can still do this in 2 different ways, but this time on the table saw. First, with a dado blade, just set the height of your groove and run the board through it just like on the router table. This is probably the easiest way of doing it. But what if you don't have a dado blade either? Well, in this case, we'll just have to make 2 passes with a regular blade. One with the board vertical for the height of your groove, and the other pass will be with the board flat down for the depth of it. All right, so that's it. Now we have all of our rabbets cut in our planks, and next we need to make sure that we sand all the corners smooth. They're pretty sharp at this point, and you're gonna be handling them quite a bit before installation. So a quick pass with a sanding block, and we can move on to protecting them from Mother Nature with Lust, a marine spar varnish from Total Boat, the sponsor of this build. Now, most true varnishes, to get them right, you need to spend a lot of time and energy applying multiple coats and sanding in between each. But with Lust, a unique linseed oil modified polyurethane, you can recoat within 1 hour without having to sand at all. For the first coat, I thinned it about 20% to allow the finish to penetrate, giving me maximum protection. Then for the remaining coats, I'm going full strength, and I'm just brushing it on. You can definitely spray it as well, but Lust has an amazing leveling property that will give you that perfect finish, whether you spray it, roll it, or brush it on. So let's move on to the installation. We're going to be using a miter saw to cut the miters, and making sure that your saw is square and set up right on a good workstation will help us get better results. After checking how square my shed was, and it wasn't that great, I laid out the location of all my 2x4 framing and marked it on the exterior so I know where to nail. All right guys, so when first installing these, you want to make sure that your first board is going to set the level for all the other ones. So typically when I do something like this, and this is an extreme case because I am higher here about an inch than I am there. And over a long span, you can kind of cheat on that. But for this shed, what I'm going to be doing is cutting my first board so that the top of it sits level and everything else above it is gonna look symmetrical to the eye. So if the bottom one is a little bit off, I'm okay with it because everything else above that is gonna be good. So first what I wanna do is I wanna set my first board and I wanna find the high side. So I'll place my level on it and I know that this side there is high and we are off by 1/2 of an inch there. I'm gonna mark my low side. That way I know that a full board is going to go there, and here we're gonna end up trimming it from the bottom. So once I have that mark established, I can take my level, make sure that I'm on that point there. So here I'm at 5.5, and here I am at 6 inches. So I know that from this end to here, my board needs to be ripped by 1/2 of an inch. That way everything else above it is gonna be perfectly fine. But first I need to transfer this line over to this side so that it continues fully together. This is at 5 inches. So from all the way over there to all the way over here, we have an inch drop, which means that we have to rip at an angle, and a track saw is the best tool to use for that. So there's my first piece. It is angled at the bottom and level with my level line. So I'm good there. And this one also is level with my line, and it's sitting on our drip edge. So now I can actually start making the miters. And before I actually get to cutting, I will always put the piece onto where it's supposed to go and mark which way the miter is going on the board, because I can't tell you how many times I've actually cut it backwards. So instead of being this way, I cut it this way. So I will always place a mark on my board so I don't get mixed up on the miter saw. I set my saw to the correct angle, in this case 45 degrees, and cut the miter. Then I set my saw back to 90 degrees, marked my cut, and laying it flat, I cut the end off where it's going to sit up against the door. Then I can take it to the shed, test fit it, and cut the mating side. Once I'm happy with the fit of both boards, I can put finish on the bottom and back side. Because we cut it off, we still want to protect that wood, so a little bit of finish will go a long way. For the first couple of rows, I'm going to be building my corner first, meaning that I'm going to apply glue to the miter and nail the two planks together before putting them on the wall. This technique works really well when you have short planks like this, and it gives you a perfect mitered corner. This is just one way of doing it, and further up the wall, I'm going to show you guys how to install it, nailing it directly to the shed, like most installations. And next, to make things a lot easier, what I can do is I can actually take a measurement and write it down, and this one is going to be 38 1/2 to this corner here. So I'm not taking a measurement to the exact corner, I'm just taking it to where the rabbet ends. So for my next one, I'm going to put it on here just like before, mark which way the miter is going to go. And it really doesn't matter where your miter is because we're gonna be trimming the backside. That's the beauty of having one end that's completely straight and the other mitered. You can cut the miter wherever you want and then trim the backside. I hook my tape over the lip and measure 38.5 strong, a 1/16 longer than the original measurement. And I do this because I can always trim that 16th off. I rather go back and forth to the saw and make a few cuts, sneaking up on the perfect fit, than being short and ruining the plank. And here's a trick if you want to take off just a hair, so probably a 16th. Bring the blade down, and the blade actually has spring to it. And then you bring your piece up to the blade, lift the blade, and it will take off just the 16th for you, just to get you right up to where you need it to be. All right, next we have to figure out the spacing between the ShipLap. And there's a traditional way of using dimes. It's called dime ShipLap. What they used to do is take an actual dime, stick it between the boards to get their spacing, which is perfectly fine. I love the way it looks, but for me, I want a gap that's just a little bit larger. So I'm gonna be using CR2032 batteries, basically what you put in your watch. And these are just over 330 seconds, and that's gonna work perfect for us. Right, Stella? And before continuing to go all the way up, I want to check up against the ledger of my window to here all the way across to make sure that I am still level. 77.5, 77.25. All right, so what that means is that I'm perfectly fine here, but somehow these are dropping by 1/4 of an inch. So what I want to do is actually raise this up off of my battery by probably a 16th. And I'm gonna do that on every course. That way, by the time I get to halfway, I should be perfectly even. And you're never gonna be able to see with the naked eye of those adjustments. Let's see what that's gonna look like. Oh, buddy. Yes, sir. Let's do that. Another way of actually doing it is putting your piece up there, marking where the miter's going to be, and cutting it there. And if you have a 0 clearance insert in your saw, you can just align your mark with where the 0 clearance cut is, and that is going to give you the perfect location of your cut. To install them directly on a wall, I cut my plank to size, test fit it multiple times, and make any adjustments I need. Then I can apply glue to the entire miter, and I used 1¼ 18 gauge brad nails on the miter side and 2.5 inch nails on the lip and bottom of the board. Did I not? Oh my God, I forgot to put the gaps in. No. No. Got it. All right, guys, so my concern is with all of these rips that I have on the Tyvek from when I pulled the board off. And this is a water barrier for the shed, so I definitely don't want any holes in it. So I'm going to be using T-Rex's clear repair tape. This is the same exact stuff that I used to tape up the underlayment underneath the metal roof on the shed, and it's gonna work perfect to repair these holes. All right, so now that we have a couple of courses established, we're good to go with our height all the way up to our windows. It's pretty much a repetitive process at this point. So let's watch a cool montage. Let's do it. right, with a quick wipe of the brow, I need to install the last row before putting on my trim piece. And since we made those adjustments earlier to our reveals by a 1/16 of an inch, we are now parallel to my windows, and that last plank can be just ripped straight on the table saw. Now, as I sit here and I edit this video and I watch it over and over, I realize that I could have cut a rabbet in the trim piece and overlapped it over my plank. That would have been an ideal way of doing it, but because I didn't think of it at the time, I put a generous amount of silicone to seal everything before nailing in that last trim piece. There we go. We got ourselves ShipLap on a shed.
All right, guys, so the accent wall is complete and so is the shed, and I couldn't be happier with the way this project turned out. It's been almost a year since I finished it, and this siding looks as good today as it did the day that I put it in. So that speaks loads to Lust and its durability. And if you guys want to check out Total Bolt's line of finishes and epoxies, check out the link in the description below. So if you guys enjoyed this video or learned something from it, hit that subscribe button along with that little bell notification so that YouTube knows to notify you next time I put out a video. Or you can click one of these videos up here from the shed build series, and I'll have it linked in the description below as well. Thank you so much for joining me on this experience. I'll see you guys next time.